So with all the lies and nonsense that was spread on Joe Rogan's podcast with Dave Smith and others who spread nonsense about World War II, people claiming Churchill was the real villain, that Israel is the primary aggressor and villain in its justified moral war against Hamas, the real genociders. I want to show you someone that appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast who has said the truth, who does understand the truth. Commentator and analyst Coleman Hughes, who said the truth about Hamas and Israel on Joe Rogan's podcast. Have a watch.
What's unique about this war, unlike every other war that I could think of, is you have an army in Hamas that has perfected the art of embedding itself, enmeshing itself with civilians so that you cannot hit them without hitting the people around them. Other armies have done this, but none have perfected it to the extent that Hamas has. No army that I know of in military history has had 15 years to build 300 miles of tunnel underneath a city that they don't use to shelter the civilians, but they use to shelter themselves so that they can operate right under a kindergarten, right under a mosque. So this is a challenge no army has faced. And so that's what makes this war different. And yes, I agree with all of the absolute tragedy and suffering of the Palestinian people, but it's what creates that is the way Hamas fights. And either we can say one of two things. We can either say, well, Israel doesn't have a clean shot, and so they have to let Hamas get away with it because it's too much to bear. But then we are essentially creating a situation where terrorists have found the perfect solution, which is that you can cross the border, go house to house slaughtering your enemies, and then hide behind your own people and they can do nothing about it. It's a perfect strategy. Can we live in a world where we allow that to be an acceptable strategy? I don't think so. And it's very ugly to watch. It's heartbreaking, and I completely understand why people don't think the way I think when they see the videos. I completely get it. But I don't think we can actually live in a world where that's allowed to be a strategy.
I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah. And I saw a Hamas official apparently was asked for comment on why they don't let the civilians hide in the tunnels, right? That could protect them, surely. You know what he said? He said, no, because that's for Hamas. That's to protect the Hamas fighters. That's who you're dealing with. If you really cared about the Palestinian civilians, the Gazan civilians, your only outrage, your sole outrage would be with Hamas and Hamas alone. It would be at Hamas's doorstep, not at Israel's. And as Coleman Hughes rightly points out, if Israel were to say, well, we can't attack because you're using human shields, then you're incentivizing more human shields, you're incentivizing more terrorism. The only thing that disincentivizes using human shields and having more human shield collateral damage is by saying, we are still going to fight you even if you use it. You'll notice when Arab countries fight each other, they don't use human shields so much because they know the other side won't care. And so it's disincentivized. As he pointed out, yes, there's suffering, but where does the blame lie? At whose doorstep are you going to put it? And this really gets to the crux of so many of the issues in the whole Israeli-Arab conflict. Yes, there are security checkpoints. Yes, Israel has to censor for what comes in and out of Gaza for weaponry. Duh. Yes, there's been displacement. Yes, there's been bloodshed. The question is, where does the blame lie? And as anyone who just delves into the history and the conflict just a little bit, we'll see if they are fair, honest, and objective. Is that every single thing that the Palestinian cause, quote unquote, laments has been self-inflicted. I would just ask Joe Rogan and Dave Smith and others, do you think it was inevitable what happened in Gaza? When Israel withdrew in 2005? Could they have made better choices that could have led to Gaza being such a prosperous statelet, basically? Or was this all inevitable, that they chose to build these tunnels and this terror network and create a society and educational system and institutions based on a jihadist death cult? Well, Israel did the blockade from the start. No, they didn't. After the people elected Hamas and started lobbing in rockets into Israel and planning terrorist attacks, Israel says, maybe we should monitor what goes in and out of Gaza. Not stop things, the flow of goods, but monitor it so we don't have things that could be used for weaponry. If you're against that, then I'm sorry, you are an anti-Semite. Because you're against Israel and the Jewish people's right to live. Everything, from the great displacement of 1948 that they lament, that happened because the Arab side chose to wage war against the Jewish state. People think it's like the Jewish state came there and kicked everyone out, and then of course they resisted. No. The Jewish state established itself through people who are living there through legal means, legal migration and land purchase, Jews living there. The United Nations said, well, there are Jews and Arabs living here. There has been a Jewish state previously. They have a 3,000-year-old connection to this land, 4,000 actually. And you've also have Arabs living here since the Islamic conquest of the 7th century and onwards. And actually, a lot of migration came later when Jews started returning to the land en masse. So they said, well, there has been a sovereign Jewish state here. There hasn't been an Arab one, but there's lots of Arabs living here. For demographic reasons, let's just create 2 states. That's what they proposed in the partition plan. The Jews said yes, the Arabs said no. They go to war against the Jews win that war, Arab displacement occurs. Largely, actually, because the Arab leaders that were waging a holy war against the Jewish state said leave, and once we throw the Jews into the sea, you can come back. Of course, it didn't work out for them, but this notion that the Jews just came there and kicked everyone out and they're resisting, no. The Jewish state was there and created basically largely through peaceful means. And then you had the Arab states saying, no, we can't accept the Jewish people returning to their ancient sovereign homeland, so we're going to attack them. And many Arabs got displaced. And that's our fault. That makes the Jews the baddies? Sorry. No. They are everything they accuse the Jews of. They're the ones that were seeking genocide. Don't forget, by the way, there were even more Jews that were displaced in 1948 by Arab countries, Jews living in Arab countries for centuries. They were kicked out in 1948. More Jews than Arabs were in Israel in 48. Nearly 1 million Jews. Whereas it was only about, I think, 700 to 800,000 Palestinians that were displaced. But Israel, of course, absorbed them. And the Nakba that they talk about, the great catastrophe of 1948, you know, that term was originally coined not to describe displacement, but coined to describe the fact that the Arab states were unable to destroy the Jewish state. It's not about a displacement issue. And of course, it's never been about that. It's always been about destroying the Jewish state. And if you don't understand that, which is elementary, then you're never going to understand this conflict. It's really that simple.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.